mode.
Hello, and welcome to this month's FM Academy session. Today, John Mathewson will be presenting on user-centered design and building applications with reusable code. I am Tim Neudecker, one of the co-founders of Logic, and our instructor today will be John Mathewson, another co-founder. FileMaker Academy is a consortium of 7 like-minded FileMaker Business Alliance members, all at the platinum level, who have gotten together to help teach the FileMaker community best practices and development techniques and help folks out. Logic, been around for about 13 years now, is located in Westport. We also do work in Boston and New York and Long Island. And we've been a platinum member since 2003. And all of our developers are certified, and we're very strong in business process and FileMaker integration, especially with websites and legacy systems. Our presenter today, John Mathewson, is the president of Logic. He is certified in every version of FileMaker Pro and is an avid hobbyist with electronics outside the world of programming. He also loves to design audio equipment and smaller electronics. If you have any questions during today's session, please use your control panel for the webinar to send those questions to this. I will be organizing those while John is presenting, and at the end we will try to answer as many questions as possible. If we can't get to a question today, we'll do our best to respond to them on our blog at keologic.com. Also, after the session is over, the sample files from today's session will be uploaded to the blog so that you can download them and experiment with them on your own. At this time, I'd like to hand the session off to John Mathewson, who will teach us about user-centered design and reusable code.
Thank you, Tim. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to go through really 2 sections of this presentation today. The first one is about reminding us why user-centered design is so important. I think it's an area in FileMaker that is developing. Certainly people like Heather Winkle, who joined FileMaker several years ago, have drawn attention to this, but there are a number of other developers and activities in the industry that are really building this focus on understanding users. And I'd like to review some of the key practices with us so that we never lose sight of them. And there's really 4 areas: defining goals, writing use cases so it describes what it is that users can do, building layouts that are focused around purpose and use, and then observing your code in use so that you're learning from seeing users interacting. After that section of the session, I would like to move to talking about some reusable code. These are some techniques that we've developed here, and I'm putting them forward as an opportunity for people to learn who may not have had too much opportunity with reusable code, and also to promote some of the activities that are going on in the industry. I wanted to mention that in my last session, which was back in December of 2012, where I presented a session on building applications for less than $15,000, what I was talking about was building powerful applications that have a high user focus and a high ROI, and that's really a focus that we're really trying to get better at, which is using FileMaker 12 tools to rapidly build things that really work well for users but don't cost too much to develop. I'm going to start by talking about naming conventions. I do a lot of coaching, and in the coaching we always start with naming conventions. The reason for that is that the naming conventions allow us to use those naming conventions to form the basis of some of the scripts and other techniques that we use that make our code reusable. Then I'm going to go through 4 different areas. I hope I have enough time for all this. One is a navigation script, which I showed in my last session. The second is a sort script. The third is a tab switching script, and the fourth is a referential integrity script, which just to get past the technology, the referential integrity means how do you make sure that the data across your application is updated and kept current. So let's dive in. So user-centered design, I came across this great cartoon, a guy named Joshua Porter. There are many people on the web who write about user-centered design. I love this little cartoon. What is more important, content or design? Use. And I think what this is pointing to, and people, Tufte, the great design people, they all say the same thing: build around use, because it's not what it looks like, it's how it performs. And obviously, how it looks can contribute to how it performs, but in the end, the most important thing is how it gets used and what the capabilities of your software are. So there's 4 stages: establish goals, define features, design layouts, and observe. So let's talk about them. So the first one, and this comes from Heather Winkle, this is a great little reminder and something that's really helpful. And this is helpful whether you're designing something big like an application or something like a module or something even a part of an application. And how it works is this: is you say, okay, what am I designing? What's the form? So design something, a thing. For what purpose? And one of the things that's really key here is what level of automation. We find this to be a very important conversation with clients, because you might have a client that's very much a do-it-yourselfer and wants something very basic and doesn't want a bunch of elaborate tools. In fact, they want something very simple. When you might have another client who really doesn't want to use fundamental tools at all and expects one-button clicks to perform really what they're looking for. So understanding that level of automation, I find, is extremely important. Then the next is, what's the activity? What's it do? And the final thing, of course, is the users. Who's using it and understanding them. So an example is design a cache-operated machine for quick and easy ticket purchasing by passengers. Or taking it to a database, build a network database for automated generation of advisor accounts by the company accountant. These are examples of goals and very helpful, because what they do is they get to the detailed purpose of why you're doing what you're doing. The second step here is then to define the stuff in use cases. And for those who saw my last webinar, this is a review, but I think it's an important one. What we do is we describe everything that a system, every feature in a system, is described in terms of basic language. And that language is, what can a person do and what can a person expect? And what we find is that this language is a language that can be simultaneously understood by clients as well as developers, and it can also be tested. So an example, accountant can import Excel account transactions received from custodian banks. Accountant can review and correct the imported data before processing it into advisor accounts. Accountant can expect, this is the system now, what they expect back, the system to automatically link imported Excel data to existing accounts, advisors, and custodian banks. And so they can expect, you can see that's obviously a level of automation kind of statement. So once you have these, our focus is then to build simple layouts around purpose. And this is one I showed back in December, and it is a very simple design, and this is where those activities that I just described all take place. You can import, you have advisor transactions that you can review, you can check your fees and commissions, they can check whether they're in balance, they can add stuff, they can affect dates, they can print reports, and they can navigate to all other parts of the system. And this is all handled right from one location. When we change perspective, and I'll show you the actual application in a few minutes, it stays all with this at once kind of view, and it also does things like uses FileMaker new grouping tools to make sure that your data that sits together looks like it sits together, and therefore has less eye fatigue on the user. So that's kind of our goal. We want to do that with everything we design, and FileMaker 12 gives us lots of great tools to do that. Doesn't matter what it looks like. These are just 6 different examples I choose somewhat at random. They're just all using different themes. They all have different purposes, but the idea is that they're all doing the same thing. They're designed around purpose. The final stage is to observe your software in use, and this is true whether it's an iPad, an iPhone, or a desktop application. It really doesn't matter. But the trick here is you've got to watch your stuff in use, and we really view this as a 2-stage thing. The first is to observe it in the hands of people within your own organization, and I mean not the developer. So this means if someone's developing it, then give it to someone else who hasn't developed it, and watch them go through the application and learn from what they do, because you will see things that you never dreamt you'd see if you're the developer. And most important, resist the temptation to comment. Heather Winkle was the first that drew my attention to this important concept. But when you are the author of something, you are so moved, shall we say, to want to comment and correct and show them the right way to do things, because there's a certain sense of pride, and also you understand how it's supposed to work. But clearly that is not what you're supposed to do. So it's really a four-step process, and if you think about it, it's really a system. And if you read about this stuff on the web, you'll see that people view this as a system. It's a methodology. So you define your goals, you describe your use cases, you design your tools, your layouts, whether it doesn't really matter the medium, and then you observe your code in use. You use that as a learning process to redefine goals, describe use cases, and design. And through that, you'll have a continuous improvement process, and this goes through Six Sigma and many other types of techniques in business, and certainly should be used in software as well. An interesting point on this layout that I showed you a few minutes ago, there was a new tab added between December and now, and this was based on the fact that the accountant does these imports quarterly. And so what was happening is, on the quarterly basis, she would have to download information from a service called Morningstar, and then take that information and bring it into the system. And what would happen is, in the meanwhile, data would be moved around, columns would be changed, and she had a lot of difficulties when we were importing. She was spending a tremendous amount of time trying to figure out what the correct sort order was. So we added this tab, which includes two things. One is a very explicit description of what it needs to be. Shows her in Morningstar language, the exact Morningstar language, exactly by column, exactly what has to be in the spreadsheet. And if furthermore she needs an example, she can click on this and download a sample. And this, in fact, is a sample that she herself uploaded, so she knows kind of it's her own work and she can manage that. This alone saved her several hours every quarter when working on this information, and that was found by watching her actually use the system. There was recently distributed, I received an email. This is kind of a fun video, and the link is there. And I do want to point out that I will distribute on our website. We will have a PDF of these slides, so you don't have to worry about writing down links and stuff. But this YouTube video is done by a company called Human Factors International, and it's really cool. What they do is they take you through some of the studies that have been done about usability and what the actual cost is when things are poorly designed. There are 12 factors that have been identified as failures of software in the field, and use makes up the top 3 of them. So this idea of improving the use of your system and the usability of your system is not simply a nice to have. It really should be viewed as a need to have. And this video is kind of a nice dynamic cartoon that they take you through all these different little vignettes and show you kind of how it works, and I thought it was kind of cool, so I wanted to share that with you. So now we'll talk about the second part of this, which is talking about reusable code. And the first part of this will be a little dry, but I think it's important, and that is we're going to be talking about the data structure and naming conventions and why they're important and how we can use them. The second is I'm going to talk about some tools for reusability. These are FileMaker tools, various functions that work well. And then I'm going to take you through 4 examples, the navigation system that I've discussed before and will show you, reusable sorting, reusable tabs, and reusable referential integrity tools. So I hope that these will be helpful for you. And the sample database that I put the stuff into will also be available for download from our website after. It'll probably take us half an hour or so afterwards to get this stuff posted. So let's talk about structure. So going into conventional structure, the entity relationship diagram, we've certainly used these for years, and it is your conventional way of showing how the stuff, the various tables in your system will interact with each other, and the entities, by the way, which is where the name comes from. And so this is actually the example that I showed back in December, and it shows kind of a relationship diagram. And one of the things I've always found in doing this, that while it's conceptually helpful, I find that when it comes to actually implementing it in FileMaker, it's not as helpful. So since then, came up with a new tool, which I call a FileMaker relationship diagram, an FRD. And what this does is it attempts to build the relationships in terms of modules, because that's actually how you code when you're doing anchor buoy. You have the concept in every case of a core, an anchor, or a centerpiece of your module. A nice way I like to think of it is think of the diva. So you've got Celine Dion, and she's performing on stage, and the green guys are all the people who are the supporting cast, the lighting crews, the musicians, all the various people that allow that singer to get out there and perform. And so in anchor buoy, what we do is we always make sure that our layouts are only based on the anchors. That's it. They're always based on the anchors. We never base layouts down here. And we use the very important tool go to related record to jump from one of these to another. And I've gone through this before, and I'm not going to repeat it now, but there very much so is a reliable way to do this, and you can end up with a huge system with many modules, and they all stay very simple like this. And the FileMaker relationship diagram allows you to map that out. And I found it, two things happened. First was it fits with FileMaker better. Second is it was much easier to draw because you're not worried about all the complex interactions system-wide. What you're worried about is saying, okay, if I'm going to produce an estimate, what are all the pieces of information in my system that I need to get the estimate? Another point to note is two things. One is that there is a legend that comes with it showing the anchor, the buoy. Red, by the way, means there's a cascading delete, which means if I delete its parent, the child is going to be deleted. And then the other one is going to be an auto create, which says that if it's turned on, then within a portal I can automatically create a record from that. So it's a very simple way. In every case, the blue is the centerpiece, and the supporting cast are either green, red, or yellow. The other thing to note is that this is in English. It's not. It's just in simple language. It is not in any sort of computer code, which takes us to the next thing, which is looking at actual FileMaker. And this is an example of a single module based on the accounts table, ACC accounts. And on our naming convention, the first three letters give us the TOG, the second three letters give us the table. And you'll notice that as we go through this, it starts with the TOG, it starts with the first table in the string, which is always the diva, and then it goes to the next one, which in this case is expected fees. Then it comes down here, and it's from accounts to the accounts table, to the expected fees, to the periods. So we sometimes will put a legend up here, or you can also roll over this little button over here on the left-hand side, and it will tell you the underlying table name, and our table names reveal the code in the first position. So it's a really neat little way. And what this allows us to do is to use this form, which is very clearly laid out, as a tool to understand the structure of our data. And I'll show you in a few minutes how valuable that is when you're trying to code. So this is how it works. And this is just a reproduction of one of those little pads that I showed you. So your first one is your TOG. Your second one is your table pathway. In this case, we're going from accounts to account transactions to advisors. And if you have special conditions, in other words, it's not a standard parent-child relationship, meaning a foreign key, primary key relationship, then you can put in here, hey, this is actually not your conventional. This is actually built to support, say, a value list. The cool thing also is when you click on this little table, it always tells you the underlying table name, and we always put the abbreviation for the table name with an underscore and then whatever we want to call the table. And notice that when I click on this, I always get the name of the last one in the train, because this particular tab is based upon, or not tab, but this pad, I guess is the correct word, the table occurrence is based upon this one over here, which is the advisors. So it's a really great tool, very easy to use, very consistent. We use it always. I also wanted to point out that going from spaghetti code to this, as long as there's good fundamental structure, you can do an entire application in an hour and a half. It doesn't take that long, and it really is beneficial. If the person who's written the code hasn't used any anchor buoy at all, like in other words, it's all one big spaghetti, then there's a bigger job. But if it's a matter of just renaming and organizing, I've taken many applications that have been very, very hard to follow and redone them with this naming structure and done the whole thing in an hour to 2 hours at the outside. The next naming convention that we use, and I'm almost done with all this, is housekeeping, is to name our standard layouts according to that. Now, we mentioned that layouts are always based upon the first table occurrence, which is the diva, the anchor, and so it always has the structure of the TOG and the first table. Then we do 2 underscores, and we say what type of form is it. So it's a form, it's a list, it's a table. If you want a custom one, you can name it whatever you want. There's absolutely no restriction, but these are the 3 standard ones that we use, and they work automatically in our navigation system without any additional coding. In this case here, we can say we want an explicit layout, and we can call whatever name we are looking for. So this is the standard form that we use. Last bit before we go to our demo, in the FileMaker reuse functions, here are some that are very valuable. There are others, but these are some of the ones that are really valuable. Certainly one is the evaluate function, and what it does is it says, okay, if you give me a text expression that essentially is what you would see in the calculation engine in that dialog, and it will evaluate that and execute it. So this means that we can build expressions using some of these other tools down here, and we can make that as a builder that allows us to execute code. And this is how a lot of this reusability is done, because what we're doing is we're reading that structure that we just talked about to understand the underlying relationships and other important pieces of information. We're building expressions based on that and then executing them, which is really very powerful. The second part of the argument, which you may or may not use, this is optional, is trigger fields, which says, okay, when something changes, what's going to cause that expression to evaluate? In the stuff we're showing today, we're not really using the trigger fields. We're simply just using the expressions. Layout table name is really good. It gives you the name of the tog, not the actual table, but the tog itself underlying any layout. So that's really great for analyzing what your structure is. The second one is layout name, which you get that straight from the layouts. The fourth is that you get a list of all the layouts in an application, which can be very useful for checking to see whether something's valid. And another very important one is layout object names. When you're on a layout, checking to see what objects have been defined by you. You have to define them, and what's available, because you don't want to try and call an object that doesn't exist. It actually throws an error. Although it's a somewhat invisible error, then nonetheless it is an error. So you can use this to say, hey, do I have my objects properly identified before I attempt to navigate to them? The let command is extremely important, gets used everywhere. And what it does, it says, okay, give me a bunch of expressions and variables, and I'm going to populate these variables, and then I'm going to perform a calculation on them. And this is widely used, and I'm sure many of people attending are already using these. But where it gets really powerful is when you use it with an evaluate. So you put a let, or multiple lets actually. You can do a whole bunch of stuff in this, and you put a let inside an evaluate. And what this does is it allows us to assign global variables. And so a lot of the automated nature of some of this reusable code comes from assigning global variables in this structure here. And again, in the sample file that will be on our website, I've provided lots of examples of that, so that if you want to sort of pull it apart, because if you're anything like me, I find this stuff hard to follow in a webinar or in a live session. It's just a lot more fun to kind of get it on your own desktop and pull it apart and analyze it. So let's go and let's take a look at some of our demos directly in FileMaker. So this is the system that I showed back in December, and I wanted to point out that, let me just do this. I don't know, I'm getting a little bit of a bounce there. I hope that doesn't distract us. So what I wanted to show you is that this is the kind of the all-at-once view that I was talking about. And our goal here is to allow the person who runs the system to move around the system and be able to address output reports, do all sorts of different, oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong tab, but output reports and do all sorts of stuff. And then we use this as a sub-menuing system. And over here we have not only highlights that come with the menuing system in FileMaker 12, but we also give tools to show people exactly where they are. And all of this navigation is handled automatically through the script I'm about to show you. So I'm going to minimize that, and I'm going to come over here, and this is the demo file that we will be handing out. And I've called it Anchor Buoy with Nav. This started out as a demonstration of the Anchor Buoy technique. You will see in it we have our relationships, and there's lots of explanation in the file. But you will see that in each case we're using the same naming convention, as well as this has cascading delete, for example, and we do have a legend up here saying what the 4 tables in the system are, and there's a fair amount of description that is provided here. And these, as I said before, form the basis of all of the scripts that I'm going to show you today. I do want to point out that there's a help menu, and this goes through and takes you through all of the different areas and will allow you to look at that, and I've done my best to try and describe how these things work, and certainly if you have any questions, feel free to email me or follow up. I do want to point out, and this is really important, this code has been written for demonstration purposes. I have not done all the error checking and making sure that, excuse me, there's no back door or anything else that could be handled either from a security hole or any of that sort of stuff. My purpose here is to show a technique or several different techniques, and I really encourage you to test it and test it and security check it before you use this stuff in live applications. So let's go. Let's take a look at some of these things. So the first one here, and you'll see it's very much like is the ability. Oh, that doesn't work. Wow, what happened there? Oh, we'll fix that. We've got companies, we've got industries. Now there's a couple of behaviors I want to draw your attention to here. First of all, if I click on industries, nothing happens. It just goes to industries and stays there. If I go to companies, if I click on it again, it shifts between the list and form view. You can see your layout name up here. It goes in, shifts back and forth. Nothing happens when I do this. When I go over to assets, same thing, back and forth. Another nice behavior of this is I come to companies, I'm on my list view. Okay, I'm going to change it to my form view. I'm going to go to my assets. I come over here to my assets, I go back to my companies. Oops, I'm on my form view. I change to list view, I go to my assets, work with my assets, come back to companies, it's on the list view. In other words, what's happening in the background here is this script that I'll show you is not only keeping track of all of this stuff, it's also keeping track of the user's experience. And in my experience, this is one of the key things that people complain about when using applications, is that there's not sufficient attention paid. In this example, we're not saving these preferences, but obviously you could. If you ask how this is being done, it's being done very simply by creating a series of different codes in the background. These are global variables, they're holding values, they're showing us all sorts of important stuff, and there is a naming convention. There are 6 repetitions available for each of the different tags. Notice that the name is $$, which means it's a global. You have com, which is companies in this case, and you have 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, which are the different, you have 1 is your sort, 2 is your different form types used. 3 is, let's say I got to remember all these, is whether you have a tab change. 4 is referential. 5 is referential integrity. I can't remember them all. I'll show them to you in a bit. But anyways, the point is that these are all recorded automatically and they're standardized. So let's go to see how this works a little bit. So the first thing is that in our script we have a layout tool, and there's a lot of stuff going on in the script. It's not a big script actually, and the cool thing is you can literally, because of this reusability, you can just copy it into your system. You don't have anything to do to make it work except to copy it into your system. The only thing that we have to do is define within these little checkboxes. And what it is there are 3 different variables that have to be defined. And the first one is to tell it what tags have a form. So if you notice, this one says has forms. So I've told it that the companies, industries, and assets have a form. You then go to the has list. I've told it that list is only available on companies and assets. And has table, I've told it there's nothing. Just put 3 X's. Could be blank, but I just put 3 X's to keep the form. And that's it. That's all you have to do. And the rest of this is all automatic. You'll notice here I mentioned evaluates. You see there's evaluates going on in the middle here. There's some custom functions that are supplied in the thing. Get element is finding out names from things like get layout name. There's some fairly complex like case statements that are taking you through a series of different choices, and what they're doing is they're looking whether the person has requested a destination that's in a new tag, whether it's not a new tag, what are the conditions, and then the last one is when they've selected and only the one that they're on is actually the one they've selected. So all of this stuff just happens in the background, and you don't need to change any of it. Of course, you can change it if you decide to. This one down here is for the special case where we pass a parameter, a layout reference, where, remember I showed you a little bit of a yellow tab before when we were giving layout names. This one processes in the situation where someone has requested a specific layout type, and it evaluates whether it's one that is registered or not registered and handles it appropriately. Then comes down, it does a bunch more of checking, error checking, and various other things. And when it's all successful and it's found that it can do this, it comes down here and it records it, and it uses that evaluate that I was talking about, where it does an evaluate with a let inside it, and it actually sets a variable. And these are escape characters, and so it's kind of, unfortunately, it's not that easy to read, but this is very powerful stuff in that it sets the values in those globals that I showed you a few minutes ago, and then finally it determines whether you've gone to a new TOG and the new TOG is or is not sorted, because the person may have left it sorted, or they may need to still sort it. It then comes in and says, okay, if it's not sorted, do it. And notice that the only thing it has to tell is what TOG, because it remembers through those globals what the last sort choice was of the user and automatically sorts it according to their last choice. So it does a tremendous amount of stuff in a relatively small script that can be easily cut and paste. And we use this, now that I've got this, at least for, as I say, these smaller systems, it's just a great tool to be able to use all the time to handle navigation. So on the front end of it, setting it up to create a button for it is really pretty straightforward. If I take my company's button, there's really two things that I have to set. One is I have to call the script. I have to say do this script, perform script, go to layout, which is our script we just saw, and all I do is I tell it what TOG it is. That's it. That's all I have to do. I tell it the TOG in the name, and I'm not explicitly calling any particular layout form. I'm simply saying use my user preferences and select the correct script. And then the last piece of the puzzle with this is simply to go into the conditional formatting, and this simply uses the get layout table name. The get layout name, could use the get layout table name, would also work. And it says if this is COM, then color it and underline it, and that gives us our behavior. So what we do when we're setting up a new application is we go in and we say, okay, great, we've got all these various things set up. Now take this and copy it. We use our powerful alignment tools that are provided in the new FileMaker 12. We simply copy it and paste it on every one of the layouts, and there's nothing else to do. It works independently. It doesn't care what layout it's on. Works just fine. And all the behaviors are inherited automatically. One thing to remember, you notice this is a little bit off this line. It's off by 3 pixels. The reason is when you have list and form view, you get a small little space of 3 pixels or points on the left-hand side, and you don't want this thing jumping back and forth. So the form version is offset by 3 pixels off of the list version. We won't save it. Okay, so I mentioned before that this is not working, and I was saying, well, why isn't it working? So I come in here and I look at my stuff and I say, wow, I've got all the stuff. I've got C2A is a join table. It's companies join assets, right? And it's a join table. I've got all the different layouts. I can see the layouts, but I'm not getting them when I go there. What's going on? Well, the simple answer is, and by the way, I also point out that they're named correctly. They're using our standard naming convention. So I come in here, manage scripts, go to layout. I say, okay, oh, I see what the problem is. I haven't registered them. So I just come in here, semicolon, C2A. And I close this, I save it, close this, assets, C2A, I got the form. Oh, but I don't have the others. Oh, okay, no problem. Come back into my script. Obviously, I could have done this in one stage. I'm just trying to make a point. Come in here. Oh, I also have a list form. I go, okay. Now when I go here, I get both behaviors. So it's as simple as that. So as you're building an application, if you know all your, going back to your FileMaker relationship diagram, if you know all your stuff, go ahead and load them in, develop your menuing system, and then as you add stuff, you simply register them with the script as they move from development into live. You notice we still have a table view that I'm not using. Now, I reserved that because I wanted to show you the third way you can use the script, which is to explicitly request something. And the way I'm going to do that is to specifically come in, and instead of just using the tog in the table, I'm actually going to specify what layout I want to go to. And this can be a registerable standard table, or it could be anything else. It could be a report, it could be a utility layout, it could be absolutely anything. Really doesn't matter. And when I do that, it takes me to the layout, even though in theory it doesn't exist. However, it's not registered with the script, so when I come here, it still doesn't appear, but when I call it explicitly, it does. So that's a tool that you can use for all sorts of special purpose stuff. And again, it's all that one script that handles all those activities. Okay, so I'd like to move now on to the second thing which I want to show you, which is some kind of cool behavior on your list views, which is, I'm going to first of all show all my records, and I wanted to point out that when I go over this, first of all, I get a nice little tooltip that says sort by company. Second thing is you'll notice that when I roll over these things, they highlight, so they implies right from the beginning they're buttons. But the nice thing is that when I click on it, if it's not underlined, it's in descending order. If it's underlined, it's in ascending order. And again, this is just one set of code that just works straight off of the system, and there's no special coding that's required. And once I define one of these buttons and the sort script that goes with it, and I'll show you that in a sec, you can copy this from anywhere to anywhere. You can copy it from companies to industries, and it will just work with some minor setup. And again, this is sort of reusable code kind of in action. Here, my asset name is also being used as a sorting script. So we've got some really kind of cool things. Now, I wanted to show you, here's an example here of date added, works great. I come over here, nothing's going on. So again, I've got something that's just not really working correctly. So before I fix that, let me just show you what the script looks like. There's one script that gets called by all these tools. It's called the sort script, and all it does is it has to send it, and if you notice, this is all in curly braces, which actually means that all of these arguments are optional. And why that's so is because there are default set for everything, and so if you don't give it an argument, it simply goes back to the default of whatever was requested. So anyways, what it does is this comes in here, it goes through, grabs those parameters that we just talked about. It then says, okay, which one of my togs is it in, and then it redirects it to the correct script for that tog. Unfortunately, because scripting is a fairly hard-coded, you can't really abstract it too much. Sorting is a very much a hands-on kind of tool still at this stage. So if you add a new area to your system, you have to bring in the else if in here, and then you have to create a script. And obviously, you're not going to create a script. You're going to duplicate one of the scripts that we have, and then simply add it into your system. So let me take a look at this one here. So in this script here, there's really two things you have to do. The first one is a nice to have, which is to give it the default that says, okay, if someone selects, this is assets, if someone selects assets and they haven't selected a sort column, what's the default? And the answer is it's asset name. So the idea here is if someone just comes onto this layout and it's never been sorted, it's going to sort it by asset name by default. So that's all you have to do there. Again, you can look for these little symbols to see where. The second thing you have to do is we have to have an else-if structure for each of the buttons on that you want to sort by. There's no way to get around this. This is simply the way FileMaker is designed. So I've got two here. I've got asset name and I've got date added. And then within there, we've got is ascending or else is descending. So this is how we get the ascending and descending behavior. You simply come in here, you go in, you define it accordingly and so there's really no magic. The only thing to be aware of is that the opposite takes place here, is now descending. So you simply go through. So for every button, you've got one of these little tabs created, and again, how long does that take? Not that long. All the other stuff in this pretty complex little script that does uses the same techniques that I showed you in the other, so I'm not going to repeat them, but essentially allows the system to just perform as required. So if I want to come back here and actually add something, so I've got my asset name and it's not doing anything, there are really three things that we have to do to add a button. So typically what we do is I would duplicate a button, right? I just grab it because it has all the code already in it. I duplicate it, and then I'd make the adjustments as required. So for this we need our inspector, and so the first thing we do is we have to tell the button what to do. So like many cases, we call that sort script. Remember that single sort script, but you'll notice that the parameter is sort column. And it's the same for everything, and you never need to change it. So essentially, once this is set up, you can copy it to anywhere. There's nothing else to do. It's done. So you say, well, how does sort column know what it's supposed to sort on? And the answer to that comes, and I thank Todd Geist for this, it comes from over here, your tooltip. And what happens is we've written the code for you, so you don't have to worry about it, but this is another one of those evaluates, and what happens is we simply give the button name here, which corresponds with those else ifs that we set up in the script, and as long as they match, this will simply work. And how that's working is that when you go to click on a button, it actually fires the tooltip. And so the tooltip, which is normally used to tell users what something does, actually fires it and sets that that sort column variable to whatever we've defined it as up here. And it's really very powerful technique, and I just learned this at the recent DevCon, and it's great. It just saves some of the effort on this. Another cool thing about it is that it comes with the behavior of giving us the actual tooltip. So both come with it, just for that one activity. And then the other part of this is the conditional formatting, and again, this is just hard-coded. We come in, there's two arguments here. You come in, you put the asset name there, that same thing, and the asset name there. And so essentially, in an overview sense, all you're doing is you're creating these buttons. You're making sure that the things that are entered in the tooltip and the custom formatting correspond with your the structure that you've put in your sort script, and lo and behold, it just works. So these are all things that save a lot of time and give a great user experience. So then I'd like to go to the third thing. How are we doing time-wise here? Not too bad. So I'd like to go to the third thing, which is another user, I think, right that they should have, which is for those of you who build multi-tabbed reports, which a lot of us do, we have the behavior that when you leave a layout and come back to it, there's a tendency for the layout to always revert to the first or default position. And so what happens if I'm busily working on my notes or something a little more involved in notes, and I then move to check an asset? I come over here to check my asset. I come back to my, oh, it's still on notes. So one of the great little tools that was added in FileMaker 12 is, I believe it's 12, is the ability to know when a tab panel has changed. And again, using that same sort of logic that we've used for the sorting and the navigation, we're capturing that activity in a global variable. We're recording it with the company, so we know that the last tab that was selected was the notes. And let's just see if we can see that. So you come here and you see COM2 is tab notes. So it's telling the system. So a lot of the logic over here is being captured right over here. And so how that works is really twofold, and this is using triggers. So we come in here and we set a script trigger. Bring it over here. That says when I switch my tab, perform this script. And this script, guess what? It's got an evaluate in it, and it just sets an actually it doesn't have an evaluate. I take that back. It sets a void, which essentially means that the result of this is not what matters. What really matters is that I've set the value of that variable to capture the name of the. Oh, here actually there isn't a value. Excuse me. So it sets it over here, and it sets the value of that global so that it knows exactly where it's supposed to go back to. And that's a very simple little technique that can be added into your behavior. And it really does provide a very nice thing. And then the other part of this is that there's a go to tab, which is available to you, which is at the script level under script triggers, and it triggers when someone enters the layout. And what it does is it simply goes in and, again, using a bunch of these evaluates, goes through and finds the object name and navigates to it, but it all happens in the background. And again, this does not have to be set up. This code is all reusable. So you just go ahead and plunk these two little levels in your system, and they will work based on the tab there, on the tog that they're placed on. So that's a great little technique. And then that leads me to the last thing I wanted to show you in this demo file, and that is that there is a very important behavior that has become part of the new world we live in of cloud computing. One of our really big growing areas in our business is cloud computing. We offer cloud services, FileMaker hosting on the cloud, and it's definitely the area that's growing the most rapidly. And there's a lot of requirements that get put on a system that's hosted in the cloud that are not as prevalent when you're hosting locally. And that, of course, also extends out to FileMaker Go. And also, all of these techniques I'm showing here obviously work with FileMaker Go, so you can use them on the iPad and stuff. And so something to be aware of is that when you're running lists or things like that, we want to be able to denormalize our data. And let me start this little discussion by showing you the assets here. So I've got a bunch of assets, and then what I've got is a list of companies that are holding those assets. So, and these are all obviously just, interesting stuff. So we got a Caitlin LSA1 Mark II, and it's being held by all of these different companies. And this is, again, a very simple system. But one of the things I wanted to be able to sort this by company name. But if you've ever gone into a portal and tried to sort, the only things that are available are the local table occurrence, which the portal is based upon. So traditionally what we've done is we've done some sort of a denormalization, which is where we copy the company name into the local table. And in our company, what we do is whenever we do it, we put an underscore lookup at the end so that we know that this is looked up data. But the problem that has existed, because lookups have been around forever, has been, okay, how do I keep this stuff correct? How do I know that when I've made a change somewhere, say the company name changes, that I know that all the places that rely on the company name are going to be updated? And that's what I'm going to show you now. So we come in here, we've got like one of these companies like Hubler Rentals or Ignos Partners. So let's go to, I come in here and I go, okay, so, first of all, they're not a professional sound studio. They're actually office systems. I got that one wrong. So I can change that. Notice nothing absolutely happened. And then I go, oh, no, actually, I was right. They were professional sounds. No problem. I can come in here. I can write notes. No problem. Okay, but I come in here and I change the name, and I go Inc., because they want us to be more formal, and I get this dialog that says, do you want to save the changes to the customer? If I say no, I don't, I cancel it, it reverts me back to where I was. And then I say, oops, I meant to do that, but I wanted to put in a comma. So I go there, I click OK, it's changed. Come back over here, Hubler Rentals Inc. So as quickly as you could see, and this works great, I had a script in the background get triggered that goes out and finds all the data that is based upon the actual name, and it updates it immediately. So in here you see Hubler Rentals was grabbed. There were 4 of them. They were all updated. I go back and I go, no, actually it wasn't Hubler Rentals Inc. It was Hubler Rentals Corp. I made a mistake. I come in here. I go, okay. Come back to my COP, and there it is. And this is all decentralized data. This is a lookup. This is not the original data. So how this is working is really kind of a donut, and it's a little hard to follow, but it actually makes sense once you've done it a few times. Some things I want to point out is you only do it on the fields that matter. So you might have name and address or other things that you're using. Everything else can be edited normally. The second thing to point out is that I can make changes all over the place, and it only asks me whether I want to save my changes when I commit the record. So it's not constantly like some valids on fields will constantly be barking at you. This doesn't do that, so it's very user friendly. So we come in here, and what gets the whole thing working is a trigger, which is over here, and it says when I modify this, all I do is I say it needs a lookup. It simply sets one of those globals. I think it's number 5. And it simply says needs a lookup. So that doesn't matter how many times that gets set. Once that thing is sent to 1, when we do a commit on this layout, which is again part of our down here on the right, our triggers, when I do a commit, I say update my children. And that's the thing that springs the dialog. And it simply asks them, you've updated your information. Do you want to save changes to this customer? If they say no, it reverts the record. If they say yes, it goes through a relookup. And then all it does, it simply goes to the places, finds them, changes them, and comes back. And it's also quick. That the thing that I wanted to do is I didn't want to have this happening in the background with the user not being aware of it. So because if there were a delay, say there was a lot of stuff to be updated, I have one system I wrote for a guy who has, I don't know, maybe 13 different things. That it's one particular field that affects almost everything. So it had to go through a lot of work. It's still very, very quick. It's probably a quarter of a second. But it's enough of a pause that you're going, what's going on here? And that's why the dialogue, I think, is important. Plus, it gives the person the opportunity to revert. All other changes on the layout, except for those few areas that matter, the changes are accepted automatically. And then what it does, it calls that same script again with a reset with a parameter of 1 that says, okay, I no longer need to do an update, in which case it goes back into its normal mode. The only other part of the script that really functions is on, it's another one of the, should stay in here, on record load. It goes in and it runs that same script with a 0 parameter, which says when I've got a new record, obviously I don't need to update it yet. So it sets a 0 to just in case you've moved to a new record and for some reason a flag was set. So that's really it. These are 4 tools. I hope that they are helpful to people. My goal here is to build dialogue and to continue to work with the community in ways that we can find ways to produce code that is reliable, customer and user focused, and also get some of the kind of the heavy lifting of giving a good user experience and gets out of the way. Reminder, this has not been tested for real critical use, so please, if you do download this file, make sure that you've done your proper security and use testing before charging into a application. So back to our. So there's some additional information available to you. Best place to learn FileMaker Developer Conference. It's in San Antonio, which is a kind of cool place. It's in July 28th to the 31st. It's a little way off, but I have to say a lot of the ideas that I've been working with, and Tim and the rest of our company, are ideas that sometimes it's a percolating of something that you go home and then you start working in the evening and you're trying to figure something out, a new design pattern, and a lot of the stuff that I showed you today came from kind of inspiration that I sort of worked out a particular approach that worked and we've started to use. The second one is I want to talk about a new website which is called Modular FileMaker. It's actually modularfilemaker.org. It's been set up, and I would consider this the advanced class. There are some really cool things going on there, using design patterns, and also they have downloadable, reusable code there of some really pretty sophisticated types. I mainly learned about it at DevCon, and have not spent enough time with it that I want to demo it today. But there's no question there are many tools in there that are very, very worthwhile of your review, and that link is there. The next thing is that they're coming up on October 21st and 22nd in Chicago. There's a FM Product and Experience and Style conferences, and this is really 2 conferences back together, but they are 2 days back to back, and they have some of the leaders in the industry that are in this area of modular reusable code and user experience design. Some real expertise there are going to be presenting, and that should be a very valuable session for people interested in this. Obviously, one of the reasons we're part of FM Academy is it's a collection of the really top companies in our industry, and so by all means, take these matters up. If you have things to learn or work with them to learn more, because they're all highly skilled companies and could teach me plenty of things. So, and then finally, I certainly encourage you to email me if you have questions or comments or criticisms, or if you poke apart and say, hey, we could have done this better. Certainly, I encourage that and would be happy to have that. After my last session in December, I had really quite a bit of email back and forth, which I found very exciting. So please feel free to contact me. Tim, back to you, and let's see if we have any questions.
Thank you very much, John. Great job. We are over time already, so I'm going to do 2 of the 6 questions that we have in. For the questions that we don't get to right now, we will follow up with blog posts on our blog at keologic.com, just to make sure that we do answer everybody's question. The first question, which was actually asked by several people, is when will the demo file be available, and how can we get our copy of it, and what can we do with it? Are we allowed to use this code in our solutions?
The answer is it should be available. I mean, just a matter of time. I was making some final tweaks on it before the session, so it'll be posted within a couple hours, say at the outside, but I hope to get it up sooner than that. And yes, feel free to use it. My decision was that we've got these ideas, let's share them and get people using them because it benefits everybody. There are also a number of things that I haven't presented today that we're continuing to move forward with. That continue to build on these tools, but also other reusable code that can be really valuable for building a user experience. Also, if you go to the modular FileMaker, there's a bunch of stuff there too. Some of which are also navigation scripts. I have not pulled them apart, but there may be some usable things there as well.
And this demo file, when he says will be posted, will be on the Keologic blog. You'll be able to download from there, which you can also get to from the FileMaker Academy website. There will be a link from there to our blog post with the demo file, so you can download it from there.
Correct.
I also want to follow up that this webinar will be posted to YouTube within the end of the week. So if you missed anything or you want to watch and find out just exactly how was that done once you have the demo file, you'll be able to go back and review the entire webinar at that point. We had one other question I'd like to get to before we move on, and somebody was asking about your naming convention for tags and scripts, that you were using underscores and not spaces. Are spaces bad?
Yes, I would recommend against them. Underscores are far more reliable. They are also more visible. I didn't get into the to the custom functions that are being used. There's 2 of them. A single underscore is an argument. A double underscore is a different argument. If you're doing that with spaces, that's really hard to see. So I would highly recommend that you just go back and replace them. Again, you can do a whole app in no time. I think you'll find it's far superior. Whether it would work or not, certainly would need some modification to work. But whether it would work with spaces in that way, it probably would. But again, I wouldn't recommend it.
Thank you. We are 5 minutes over time, but we do have some other questions on iPads and such, and we will hold those for the blog. I want to remind everybody that we have our next FM Academy will be during the first week of December. So watch for that on the FM Academy website. If you're already on our mailing list, you will get notification of that. And we look forward to seeing you then. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, watch our blog, and you can always email us if you have questions. And we will try to get all of your questions answered on the blog, as well as get the demo file up by the end of today. Don't forget, if you have other questions in your area, you would like some help implementing some of these ideas, you can contact any of these companies. These are the FM Academy members.
And that's it.
And we'd like to thank you for coming and hearing us today. Have a nice day.